Hello, welcome to yet another episode of today's show. My name is Pastor Rodwell, and I just want to introduce you to my new book that is going to be up on Amazon very soon. So, Amazon Kindle, and the book is entitled How to Interpret Dreams. So, this is the book there. How to Interpret Dreams. How to interpret dreams, and I'm just gonna give you just like basic things from the book that I have talked about, and hopefully you'll be interested enough to buy the book. Okay, and I just want to say thank you for subscribing to the channel and liking the videos. The more you do that, the more the video becomes popular and the more the algorithm pushes it out. All right, so thank you. How to interpret dreams is what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm just going to briefly touch on some of the things that I discussed in the book. Okay, but what I usually want to do is to empower. My passion is to empower people. Okay, so at the end of this today's episode, I want you to go away feeling empowered. Okay, I just don't want to be another guy who was talking at you. Okay, but I want to share some things from the book that will leave you somewhat empowered and actually interested in buying the book, of course. All right, so like I said, the book will be available on Amazon. All right, and you can read it on Kindle. All right, we will make maybe some physical copies as well. All right, so I want us to begin quickly without wasting time with Genesis 37. Genesis 37. Genesis 37. Genesis 37, verse 5. It says that Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. Verse 6, he said to them, listen to this dream I had. Verse 7, we were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. Verse 8, his brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream, okay, of the dream that he had said. Okay, so that's the book of Genesis 37. It's a familiar story. We all know what happened. The brothers got jealous, sold him into slavery. So we'll follow the life of Joseph, because I like the life of Joseph when it comes to dreams, because he has one of the most established, or goes on to have one of the most established dream life, healthy dream lives in the Bible, and he develops to be a phenomenal prophet. And if you read the book of Genesis carefully, from 35 up until 41, you'll be surprised at the man that Joseph grew to become. Okay, that's just that the man that he grew to become is phenomenal. The man grew in his prophetic dream, in his prophetic gift, so much that he could use to prophesy using a cup. He could tell the future using a cup. But it started off as dreams. Okay, so, and I think some of the things that I touch on in the book, how to interpret dreams, is that the prophetic is in 3 stages. So whether you receive the prophetic in a vision of the day or in a dream at night, you have to be aware of the 3 key stages of the prophetic, which are revelation, interpretation, and application. So the revelation is how you got what you got, how you got the message that you're trying to relay. So did you get the message as rhema? Did you get the message as a voice that came to you and spoke to you? Did you get the message as a vision? Did you get the message as a dream? Okay, and so that's revelation. And then interpretation is the meaning of what you heard or saw. Okay, and then the application is what do you do about it? Okay, so the prophetic is in those three, or God speaks in those three. Or when God speaks, whatever he speaks, it has those three consequences. All right. So that being understood, and I think I've spoken about this in other videos as well on my channel or in my prophetic school. Speaking of the prophetic school, if you're interested in joining the prophetic school, just go on www.prophetrodwell.com and sign up for the prophetic school. Okay. And we will also have like Zoom classes on dream interpretation as well. I cannot share everything that I know about dream interpretation now, but the few that I can is what I'll give you now. I want to show you that Joseph has had a dream in Genesis 37, like what we have seen. He's had a dream, and the dream is the revelation. The interpretation is what he was looking for. Okay, so he wasn't telling his father and his brother the dream so that he could show off or show off, or try to make himself appear to be more important than he was. No, he was looking for interpretation, because a dream alone is useless. Okay, so if all you do is dream, that is nice, but you need interpretation. So that's why I wrote this book, to teach the people of God how, the body of Christ, how to interpret. Once we have interpretation, then the dream is meaningful. Okay. The Bible says that day by day, day after day, God speaketh knowledge, night after night he revealeth knowledge, but nobody is listening, because even though if you can hear, but if you cannot give an interpretation, you don't know what to do. The Bible says if a horn plays, but if people are not clear on the interpretation of what the horn means, then if the horn is warning against impending invasion of a rival army, you're all gonna get killed because you don't know what the horn is trying to say. Okay, so in the medieval times, they used to train you that if you hear a horn play in this way, that means that soldiers from the next village, they're coming in armed. You better run for your life. Okay. Or if a bell were to ring, or if you saw the smoke, it was a signal. So dreams are signals from God. Okay, but you need interpretation. And now Joseph here did not have the gift of interpretation. He had the gift of dreams, but not of interpretation. Okay, and so this is what he was looking for from the father or the brothers, because he knew that his father was also a man who was given to dreaming. Remember his father Jacob? He's the one that dreamt about that the tree, when he was upon the tree, when he saw the ladder of the angels going up and the angels descending. So he was given to visions. He's the same man that sat underneath a tree and he dreamt of the speckled sheep mating with the an unspeckled sheep, and blah 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 blah, and got to follow the instructions because he had the gift of interpretation. Got to follow the instructions and became very rich overnight. Literally overnight, within a few hours. Okay, so that's another story for another day. But he had developed, so because the dream, the gift develops. It develops from just dreaming, and you come into interpretation. Okay, so once you have interpretation, then the gift of dreams and dreaming becomes useful. Have you ever had a dream where you dreamt, you dreamt about something, but you didn't know what it means? So I hope through this, watching this video, you can now get to understand more of the dreams that you have. Okay, so Joseph didn't have interpretation. He went to the father looking for interpretation, and then the brothers overheard the dream. But then the brothers as well, they were gifted in interpretation, but they were not gifted in application. Application takes wisdom. Okay, so if you have a dream and you lack interpretation and you have crazy application, you're gonna kill somebody. That's what they tried to do to Joseph. So Joseph gave the dream. Everybody could interpret what the dream was saying, or at least they thought, because that's what the father says. It says, the brother says, do you intend to reign over us? Will you, verse 8, right? Genesis 37 verse 8. His brothers said to him, because they had the gift of interpretation, but they did not have the gift of application. Application takes wisdom. Okay, so you have seen something in your dream. Interpretation, after you've watched this video, after you've read the book, of course, you now know how to interpret, but you still need application. How to apply what you have seen in your dream, or what you have seen in your vision. That's very, very important. Okay, so his brothers, they say to him in verse 8, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule over us? You know, because that's to them, that's the interpretation, you know. And then how did they apply that dream? They applied it by killing him. That was their way of trying to avoid what was happening. So application is bringing into reality what the dream is saying. Okay, so whenever you have a dream, you will come back to Joseph's first dream. Whenever you have a dream, the first step to giving an interpretation for your dream is you've got to find your hook. H-O-O-K, hook. What is the hook in the dream? Okay, so that's the most important, the hook. So you realize that sometimes you dream and you have a lot of dreams, but you can only remember one or two. Why? Because it is one or two dreams that it actually had a hook in it. So sometimes you may dream, but then if none of those dreams have a hook, you will forget them. Or sometimes there was a hook in the dream, but you've forgotten the hook. So the hook is that thing that grabs your attention. Okay, so yes, it was a dream. Yes, you saw like 1,000 people in the dream, but then there was one person. Maybe they were dressed in all white and shining. That's a hook. Something that grabs you. Something that grabs you. It's that thing, that one thing that when you wake up in the morning and you remember it, the whole dream comes back to you. It's a hook. It's what you are using to hook the whole dream from the spirit world back into the world of the living. A hook. What is the hook? Okay, so it is that thing that grabs your attention, and when you forget the hook, you've forgotten the dream. I want to give you an example of a man who forgot his hook. All right, so the book of Daniel, look at the book of Daniel chapter 2. Book of Daniel chapter 2. All right, what does it say? It says that during Nebuchadnezzar's second year as king, he had dreams. They bothered him and he could not sleep. All right, so the king called his wise men to come to him. They used magic and watched the stars. They did this to try to interpret, to interpret dreams and to learn what would happen in the future. So do you see that this is an art? Dream interpretation is an art. It's a spiritual art. Okay, and here the king's Daniel chapter 2 is telling us that Nebuchadnezzar's magicians and wise men used to try and use all kinds of things, right? They used magic and they watched the stars. We'll come back to that aspect if I still have time. Okay, we'll come back to that aspect. If I don't cover everything, just read the book. Okay, buy the book, read the book. And they did this to try and interpret dreams and to learn what would happen in the future. Okay, the king wanted them to tell him what he had dreamt. So they came in and stood in front of him. Then the king said to them, I had a dream that bothers me. I want to know what it means. Then the Chaldeans answered the king. They spoke Aramaic and said, King, live forever. Please tell your dream to us, your servants, and then we'll tell you what it means. Then the king said to them, no, You must tell me the dream, and then you must tell me what it means. If you don't, I will give an order for you to be cut into pieces. And I'll order your houses to be destroyed until they're nothing but piles of dust and ashes. But if you tell me my dream, explain its meaning, I'll give you gifts and rewards, right? The KJV just puts it simple. It says that the king forgot the dream. And he's told them that, for you can see that the thing is gone from me. He says, I've forgotten the hook. All right. So when you forget the hook, you forget the dream. Okay, so if you want to remember your dreams, if you struggle to remember your dreams, just remember the hook. Just try and remember what is it that was outstanding in that dream. The hook leaves a feeling, it leaves an emotion, and if you can reconnect to that emotion, the whole dream comes back to you. The hook. So the king has forgotten the hook, and he says, give me my hook and give me the interpretation. Okay, that is what was happening there. Okay, sorry, that's not the KJV. All right, so remember the hook. What is the hook? The thing that makes your dream stand out. Okay, now I want to go back to Genesis chapter 37. Now, let's look for the hook in Joseph's dream. Genesis chapter 37. Verse 5, it says, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers, they hated him the more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain. The sheaves of grain are the hook. That's the hook for Joseph. Why? I'll tell you later. The sheaves of grain, right, out of the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright. That's the hook. So a sheaf is just grain, right? So maybe grain of wheat that are just lying down. By the sheaf standing up. Once he wakes up in the morning, even if you forget these dreams, if you just remember that there was a sheaf and it stood up, that's the hook. So why is that happening? So that he could remember the dream. So for some of you have had dreams, right? And you've struggled to remember. Go back and look for the hook. What is the hook? And so if you're about to interpret dreams, remember the video is about interpretation of dreams. Or if I come to you with a dream, or if you have a dream, remember the hook. What is the hook? What is the thing that took your attention the most? Or if someone is telling you their dream, what is the thing that, the most unusual thing? Here is the sheaf of wheat, right, standing up on its own without nobody rising it up. That's a hook. Something extraordinary. So like I said, in 1,000 people, a dream where 1,000 people are wearing white, one person was wearing red, or one person was wearing black. That's a hook. Something super ordinary. Okay? Something that stands out. Because the whole dream, listen, so the hook allows you to focus on the dream, focus on the objectivity of the dream. That's what the hook does. So if you are thinking, if you try to remember the full dream, you forget it. If you try to consider the full picture, it will be blurred. But if you focus on the hook, the dream becomes clearer to you, okay? Because the message is in the hook, right? So do you remember when Nebuchadnezzar had a dream? And in his dream, what did he dream? He dreamt. So no, let's go to Pharaoh. Genesis 41. When the 2 years had passed, Genesis 41 verse 1, the NIV says, when the 2 years had passed, the Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile. When out of the river, they came up 7 cows. Do you see that? Cows are coming out of a river. How many of them? There are 7. We'll talk about that. But cows, a cow cannot come from water. It cannot breathe underneath water. But because that's a hook. God will, so get familiar with hook. So if they get familiar with hooks, if the Pharaoh had come to you and said, I had a dream, I was by the Nile. Okay, so don't focus on the Nile. We all know the Nile. Focus on the hook, the cows that came out of the water. That's the hook. Do you see what I'm saying? All right, so that's the first hook. And then verse 2 says, when I came out of the river, they came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. There's nothing wrong with that. Grazing among the reeds, okay? Verse 3 says, after them, 7 other cows ugly and gaunt, came out of the Nile, another hook as well, right? And they stood beside those on the riverbank, right? And the cows, right, that were ugly and gaunt, ate up the seven sleek, the fat cows, and the Pharaoh awoke. Do you see that? Now, the cows, they are not what they call, they don't eat each other. Okay, cows don't eat meat. Okay, they graze. Okay, they're not carnivorous. They're not they don't eat each other. All right, so that's another hook. So two hooks: the cows coming out of the river, and the cows are eating each other. Do you understand? These are not lions that were eating cows. These were cows. So do you see how one dream had two hooks, two important hooks? And the third hook that was there as well is that the cows are fat, and the first set of cows, they are fat, and the second set of cows, they are skinny. All right. So those are not particularly hooks, but we'll talk about that. That's the next one I want to talk about. But the hooks are the two hooks. Okay. So cows coming out, cows eating each other, those are hooks. Okay. So whenever someone is telling you their dream, listen for the hooks. Whenever you have a dream, find the hook. What was the most unusual thing about your dream? What was most outstanding thing about your dream? Okay, that's your first hook. All right, and so obviously from that dream you can see that there can be more than one hooks. There can be many of hooks. Just remember one and you remember the whole thing. All right, so that's what hooked you about that dream, because you dream so many dreams in the night, but if they don't have a hook, they're not from God. There's no message in there. Okay, so the second one, just by looking at that dream, is symbology. Symbology, symbols. That's a big one. Symbology. And this is the people that do astrology, the study of the stars. Remember, we've just been reading where Nebuchadnezzar's wise men and Chaldeans, they used to study the stars. Why did they want to hear the king's dream? They were looking for two things: the hook and the symbology. So the symbology is how God speaks. That's the message. The hook is to grab your attention, but the symbology is how God speaks. God speaks to us in symbols. God speaks to us in symbols. Okay, so what is the symbology? So astrologers, they love symbols. Palm readers, they're looking for symbols. Psychics, they love symbols. Tarot card readers, they love symbols. It's all about symbols, 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 symbols. So they, if the Joker card comes up, they can say, oh, that's death. It's a symbol. It symbolizes something. So look at this dream in Genesis chapter 41. I'll read it again. When the 2 years had been filled, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile. Okay, so the Nile, first symbol, location. This is a dream about Egypt, because the Nile is connected to Egypt. Okay, the symbol. So when out of the river, they came up 7 cows. Hook. All right, because the cows are supposed to come from the field, not from the water, from the river. Sleek and fat, right? Sleek and fat as a symbol. Okay, so sleek and fat means good living, eating right, right? That's a symbol. And then they grazed among the reeds, and after them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, ugly and very thin, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank, right? And the cows, which is a symbol, which is a hook, and the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek. Do you understand? So the skinny ones, that's a symbol. Fat, symbol. Skinny, symbol. Out of order, hook. Okay? Fat and skinny, symbol. If you see a fat person, you imply they're living good. It's that simple. If you see a skinny person, you imply they're living rough. That's a symbol. So the 7 is representing now the 7 years. Okay? So I want you to see how Joseph was able to interpret that dream. So he's thinking, okay, 7, fat, all right, and then 7 skinny, and then the 7 fat is the 7 skinny. That's 7 years of fat, 7 years of good living, good eating, and then 7 years of drought, hungry. It was that the dream becomes simple. Do you see that? Once you've understood the hook and the symbol. All right. And then there's a third one, and then etc. etc. All right, I'm out of time. Buy the book if you're interested in what I'm talking about. Okay, can I share Genesis chapter 40 with you before I go? Genesis chapter 40. All right, before we do that, let's look at Joseph's dream, the one where we started, Genesis 37. Genesis 37, I want to show you the hook and the symbol in that as well. Genesis chapter 37 verse 5. And Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers. They hated him all the more. He said to them, verse 6, he said to them, listen, I've had this dream. Verse 7, we were binding sheaves of grain. So binding sheaves of grain, which is a symbol, the grain symbol. All right, in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose up, hook, and stood upright. When your sheaves while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. Okay, so now that's a symbol. The fact that the sheaf of grain, the sheaf is made of grain, is a symbol. The fact that the other sheaves came and bowed down to it, that's a symbol. But what is it symbolizing? So the brothers, I told you, they had a good sense of interpretation. They were skilled in interpretation. Jacob had taught them. So they got the part B of the interpretation, but they didn't get the part A. They missed the part A. The part B of their sheaves, which was a symbol, their sheaves, the part B of their sheaves, so they missed the symbol that the part B of their sheaves would come. They got that the part B, that their sheaves would come and worship, that they would come and worship their brother and bow down to their brother. They got that part right. But the part that they forgot, which is the part A, is that the sheaf was made of grain. And why did they have to go down to Egypt? They went down to Egypt because they were looking for grain. Do you see that? So they got the part B of the interpretation, but they missed the part A, which was key, that there will be drought. Grain is going to be very scarce one day. So much that we would have to come and bow down to our brother for some reason. So had they been wise, they would have been the one to give the interpretation to Pharaoh. They would have started stocking up grain. But because they lacked interpretation, which is how to apply what had been revealed, they decided to kill their brother. Do you see that? Hook, symbol. That's the dream of Joseph. I want to then show you Genesis chapter 40, and I'm about to close. Genesis 40 says that sometime after this, verse 1, Genesis 40 verse 1, Genesis 40 verse 1, sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against the Lord of the king, their Lord the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. He put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined, right? The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with him and attended, and blah, 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 you know the story. At verse 5, and one night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker, the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, each dream with its own interpretation. So your Bible is saying each dream, its own interpretation. When Joseph, verse 6, when Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, why are your faces downcast today? Right? And they said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is none to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." Okay? So you don't have to be the one that dreamt the dream, but if you're skilled in interpretation after you read the book on Amazon, you can now begin to interpret. Okay, so the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph, verse 9, and said to him, "In my dream there was a vine before me." In my dream there was a vine before me. And he's the cupbearer. That's a symbol. A vine. Okay, that's a symbol that the dream is talking something about his job. Okay, it's a symbol of his job somewhere. He knows this dream, something about the job. Okay, and said to him, "In my dream there was a vine before me," verse 10, "and on the vine there were 3 branches, a hook." There are usually plenty of branches on a vine, right? But now there are only 3. That's a hook. You see that? All right. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. All these are symbols now. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. And I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hands. That's a symbol of him going back to work. You know the story, right? Then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation, that 3 branches are 3 days." Right? In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your offices. That's simple. The dream is about work. 3 days. The 3 branches mean 3 days. You're going to go back to work. It's that simple. Do you see that? How by you knowing what's a hook and what's a symbol, it becomes easy. Okay? And so verse 14, "Only remember me." Verse 15, "For indeed I was stolen." Verse 16, "When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head," right? "And in the uppermost basket, there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head." Right. So look at this dream. It says, "I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head." Now we now know, okay, that the hook was 3 cake baskets. So if you're a baker, right, once you have a dream, you can have a lot of different dreams. But once you see the baskets of bread, that's a hook. You pay attention. You're like, what is that? Because that's where your passion is. Do you understand? So sometimes you dream. Maybe you're a nurse and you dream of yourself at work. Sometimes you're a driver and you dream of yourself driving. That dream, it's a hook itself. Because you always remember that. But listen, I am a preacher, right? If I have a dream preaching a sermon, I will remember the dream. But if I have a dream fighting Floyd Mayweather and I'm a preacher, how does that? It's not a hook. It's not hooky enough. And some hooks have symbolism as well. Like these 3 baskets are also representing 3 days, but it's a hook. It's a hook to begin with. Do you understand? So from the hook is coming the symbol. So watch this. And Joseph answered and said that, and so the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head, which is a symbol. And you know what that means. So do you see how symbols, hooks, and the third thing that I'm not going to tell you, that you only find out if you read the book. Okay? So thank you for taking the time to watch this. I've shared more than I wanted to share. It's gone longer than I wanted it to, but hey, buy the book, subscribe, share the video, subscribe. My name is Prophet Rodwell, and God bless you. Until I see you next time. All the best.